Welcome back to the Obvious Choice podcast. As some of you might know, I am starting to book other podcast appearances in expectation and anticipation of the release of the Obvious Choice book coming out in January. And so I actually recorded the first one last week. We've booked about 20. I've already booked trips to New York and Austin to record podcasts live. And one of the things that, we're reaching out to people, and a lot of them I don't know that well. We're expanding into other audiences too. And so these hosts don't know me from anybody else, right? And so it's pitching them like you would pitch anybody, and trying to get connections, but not always. Anyway, one of the guys gave us a piece of feedback is, I was searching for John's origin story, and I couldn't find it anywhere. Does he have it published anywhere? And I said, I don't think so. And so what I did then is I went and I wrote down basically point notes of my origin story, but I wanted to do it in a way that had some sort of kind of takeaway lesson from each piece that I'm hoping that anybody listening can apply. And so I've got like this full piece of paper, and I'll try to get through everything in one episode because we're so good at that. And there's like 15 different stories here that span 7 or 8 years. And each one is a story that I'm going to tell that has to do with me. I mean, basically from before I became a personal trainer to personal training, to cutting back my hours, to starting to build the business online, to writing, to so on, and how I kind of figured out all this stuff from the ground up. There was no funding, there was no investing, nobody backed me. Really, nobody supported me in any way at any point. I had to kind of bootstrap it from the ground up. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any connections. I had no connections in the fitness industry. I had no connections in the publishing industry. I worked at a small boutique gym in Toronto. And so how kind of it all built up. And I'm hoping that you can take a lot of this out as well for you, and perhaps get to, the next stage, whatever the next stage is for you after hearing this. And then we're, of course, going to be taking this piece of large content and breaking it up into things like Twitter threads and that kind of stuff. And so, lesson number 1 is don't just do one thing for one medium one time. Try to design, if you're going to work hard at something, a way for that to work for you in lots of other ways as time goes on.
Can you start with the part where you name your hockey stick Excalibur? Because I think that's where we want everything.
I was not good at sports growing up. I was not good at sports growing up at all. But the one sport that I was very good at was ball hockey. To the point where there was an MVP award named after me in a ball hockey league. Nice. God, I dominated that league. I led the points in that league by like 30 points every year. And I had a name for my hockey stick. It was Excalibur. Within a couple seasons, I actually started my own team in that league, and we called it Excalibur Knights. And we started every game by me holding up my stick. And everybody else came around me and they tapped the stick. That's the stupidity that I've always been interested in. Thank you, Ed.
I want to be Galahad. Could I be Galahad in your Knights of the Round ball stick thingy? That's amazing.
Okay.
The boy who draws this hockey stick from the stone shall be known as king. I give to you Excalibur.
That's the most Canadian story you could imagine. All right, let's get into this because we got a lot to cover. Enough of this nonsense.
Let's go, John. Damn it.
There's going to be
wasting
some
my
nonsense.
time again.
God damn. Here's how it starts. I grew up middle to upper class Jewish in Toronto. Every adult that I knew, every adult that I knew was a lawyer, doctor, dentist, teacher, accountant. I didn't know anything else. My dad was an engineer turned like middle manager business guy. My mom's a teacher. My sister's a lawyer. My brother's a teacher. My other brother's a small business banker. Every single adult that I knew was some sort of a professional. 3rd generation Jewish in Toronto basically means that my family immigrated here. Their kids, they worked really, really hard to be able to let their kids get a good education. Their kids were like my father, my mother, right, became professionals. I'm the next generation after that. The idea is we're now finally at the point where we can get into the good schools and have the money to afford the good education, and this is the immigrant's dream, and so you can grow up and be a doctor. Right? That was basically what I thought. And so I didn't know anything else. I didn't know a single entrepreneur. I guess intuitively I understood that businesses existed and somebody had to start them. But nobody ever spoke to me about entrepreneurship. Nobody ever spoke to me about forging your own path. I was given a lot of freedom and flexibility because I think from a very young age, I showed a propensity to be disagreeable to the core. I always thought that the ways that other people did things sometimes didn't make sense. And I have lots of memories of these. For example, I have a memory of myself in high school where I became fascinated in conversations and like how a conversation got from one to the next to the next to the next subject. Like how did we start talking about ninjas and then started talking about Mega Man and how awesome Mega Man was. And then we ended up talking about Jello. Like every conversation you have in high school. And so what I actually used to do back in high school, this is how weird my brain works, was that I used to actually track back conversations and look for those inflection points. So I'd get home at the end of the day with a notebook and I would track back a conversation like, okay, we talked about that, then we talked about that, then we talked about that. Because my thinking at the time was, if I understand what those inflection points are, then I understand conversations, then I can lead conversations much better. I've always tried to own some sort of a textbook understanding, I guess, of human interaction, of emotions, of feelings. I mean, just a lot of these things kind of didn't come as naturally to me, and I studied them. Like I read textbooks on empathy, for example, just to try to learn the types of things that other people said that they felt that I didn't really understand. And so I'd go out and like kind of systematically try to build it. So I did what all good Jewish boys do. I got a good enough education in high school, got into a good university, University of Western Ontario, and studied kinesiology with the idea that I was probably going to end up in medical school. So I needed a science undergrad. I liked movement. I liked sports. Figured kinesiology. Midway through university, I got a job in second year to work at the university gym. I had a personal trainer when I was 18. I had a personal trainer when I was 17 in university for 2 sessions because it was free at the university. It was given to all the students. And after the first session, I was like, I can do this. And so I was actually certified as a personal trainer a week after my 18th birthday and started working at the university gym. So while I was studying kinesiology, I worked about 25 hours a week at the university gym from second to fourth year. In that time, one of the things that I realized is that, this is an opportunity to be surrounded by mentors that I would not have otherwise had access to. And so I started getting the closing shift of the gym because I realized that all of the PhD students in muscle physiology and muscle nutrition would work out at night when the gym was less busy and they'd be there till close. And they'd often sit around and they'd talk about the studies and the research. So at that time, a lot of the research on creatine, a lot of the research on caffeine as an ergogenic aid, a lot of the research on protein was happening in that bubble at the University of Western Ontario and then McMaster University just down the street. And so I was able to be a fly on the wall with these conversations. And as they mentioned things, I'd write them down and I'd go home and I'd read those studies. And then I'd start to be able to participate in the conversations and ask more questions of these people. At the same time, I reached out to a professor named Dr. Peter Lemon, who was actually John Berardi's PhD advisor. I didn't know that at the time, but that's kind of a cool connection. But I asked him if I could participate in the studies, and he came in and basically taught me about research. And so that taught me that, hey, there's probably a pretty good opportunity in this fitness thing, in this gym thing, to surround myself really, really young with mentors. And I didn't quite appreciate how powerful that was until a few years later when I got a job, when I graduated university. At this point, I thought that I was going to go and do a master's and a PhD in muscle physiology. Particularly, I was interested in studying therapies to offset old age atrophy. And so testosterone supplementation, that type of thing. And like satellite cell atrophy and stuff, right? But I was like, I'll be a personal trainer for a couple years. Sounds like fun. And then I'll go back and I'll do my master's. And pretty early on as a personal trainer, I'm like 21 years old at this point, 4-year university degree, personal training people in Toronto. And I was like, man, my clients are some of the most successful, well-established people around. Like, where else can you, as a 21 or 22-year-old, basically have the most successful, the most intelligent people in your community paying to spend time with you a couple hours a week? It's an incredible job. And that one of the things that taught me at a very early age was the power of, when you're young, opting for development over money. And that's a lesson that I've kind of taken with me. When you're older, you might not have that option, but when you're younger, there's this conversation of like, oh, do I take the better job with less education or less mentorship? Or do I perhaps take the job that pays me a little bit less if it's going to potentially surround me with people that have a better opportunity to learn? And so there's another example of that where this is a couple years later, but I moved to the same company, but another gym. They opened it up in one of the most expensive postal codes in Canada, area of Toronto called Forest Hill. And all of the other trainers at that club did the smart thing, quote unquote smart thing, where they got an apartment 30 or 40 minutes away where it was much cheaper to rent an apartment. And then they drove in or they took the bus in to be able to save money, right? I did the stupid thing where I got an apartment around the block from the gym. And my apartment was about $1,200 more a month than their apartment was. But what that meant at that time was that I had, give or take, an hour extra a day where they were commuting, while I was reading books. I was in such a better mental state when I got to the gym at the same time than they were, because they were sitting in their car that entire time. Whereas I had a short walk to the gym. And so what that taught me was that there are a lot of false economies that exist and that will pop up, and it's important to recognize them. And so very, very early on, I recognized, the importance of surrounding myself with mentors and choosing jobs that surround myself with mentors, but also trying to put myself in a position that optimizes for personal development, professional development. Because, of course, what happened was that I was in a better mental state working with my clients, more stability, at least. I was in a good mood probably more often because I didn't have to drive. But I also just was able to learn more about different things. So I was able to study marketing and psychology and all this stuff in addition to the fitness stuff because I had time to do it. And as a result, my market rate went up. So now I'm not being paid $25 an hour. I'm being paid $41 an hour for training clients. I was charged out at 97 or something. And that only happened within a couple years. It was relatively quick. These false economies are kind of everywhere. We compare prices, but we don't compare the hidden prices that are also involved. It's very easy to go to a grocery store and look at the price tag and say, oh, this thing is $1 somewhere else. I'm going to make that trip. It's like, well, what's that time costing you? What's that costing you? Mental energy, alertness, fatigue, right? And so if you have the ability to be able to make these decisions, particularly if you're young, I think it's very important to choose for development over money early on, because you will find soon after that you will very quickly pass your peers. And then it's not even going to be in the same conversation. You're not even going to be able to compare. And so part, of course, of being surrounded by all of these successful people, many of them were entrepreneurs. I mean, many of them were business people. Even if they had conventional jobs, they were entrepreneurial in nature, because these were not just the doctors, these were the doctors who made the most amount of money to be able to live in these places. And we spoke a lot. And we got to know each other really well. And anybody who's been a personal trainer knows that you don't just talk about the realities of the job. You don't just talk about sets and reps when you have clients. You talk about religion. You talk about politics. You talk about family. You talk about everything and anything. And so one day I'm in the gym, and I had a 4:30 p.m. client on Tuesdays and Thursdays for about 5 years. His name was Tom. Tom was he was the chief of psychiatry at that point, Sunnybrook Hospital, one of the major hospitals. But Tom wasn't just a successful psychiatrist. He was also a very entrepreneurial doctor. He's had a couple TV shows. He's always has something on the go, where he always has some other venture on the go. And he walked up to me, and he was always late. And this is just my idiotic young brain, right? I was like, oh, this guy can't even show up for like a 4:30 p.m. appointment. Like, he's always 5 minutes late. Meanwhile, this guy has 2 kids. He's the chief of psychiatry. He has these entrepreneurial things. And he's showing up at 4:37 on a Tuesday and Thursday to work out. Yo, I could learn something from this guy, but my idiotic 22-year-old brain didn't get that at the time. So he shows up at like 4:37, and I looked at him and I said, idiot, go get changed. And he kept walking towards me, right? And I was like, go get changed. And he takes a book out of his bag and he handed it to me. And I'll never forget this moment. It's one of these flashbulb memories that I have in my mind. He just looks at me and he just says, you're not going to be my personal trainer much longer. And he handed me Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And the book the book is fine, right? This is not me recommending the book, but what the book did was it started me on a journey. He said, I see something in you. I don't know what it is, but it seems like you're going to do something kind of interesting. I wish somebody had given me a book like this when I was young. And I'm okay if after reading it, you're not my personal trainer for much longer. And what that book did, of course, was that set me down a path of reading about things that I wouldn't have otherwise been exposed to. But I didn't know where to find books. You couldn't just Google search. This is like 2009, probably. You didn't have TikTok recommending you books every single day. I lie. I've never been on TikTok in my life, and I never will. But maybe Instagram. You didn't have people recommending you books all the time. It was kind of hard to find lists. And so I didn't know where to find the best books on marketing or anything like that. But my brother had done a business degree. So the next book that I read was in my parents' basement, was my brother's first-year marketing textbook for school. So I read that. Then I went to the bookstore because I knew that books existed at the bookstore. And I looked at all of the best-selling books in marketing and sales. And I wrote down the names of them. And then I went across the street to the library and I checked out as many of those books as I could find and by the same author. And when I say that I read these books, I studied these books. I wish that I could say that I still study books the way that I used to study books. I'd look at those books that I had read at that time. These things are marked up. There's sticky notes all over the place. The back of the book, the notes and resources sections where they recommend other stuff at the back of the book. I'm circling stuff, the studies, the research. I'm just going down as many of these rabbit holes as I can possibly go down. Looking, searching. And I think that that's the next lesson is you don't have to know what you're going to be searching for. You don't have to have a goal in mind, but you do need to have some sort of a trajectory. I knew that there was some answer there, looking back, post-rationalizing it. I knew that there was some answer there. I knew that marketing, sales, the stuff is all obviously very, very important to combine with everything else that I'm doing. At this point, I figured I was going to be a personal trainer for a long time. And I was, to be fair. But I didn't quite know what it was, but I was moving in that general direction, right? Absorbing as much information as possible, following as many of these leads and pulling on as many of these threads as possible in these books. And then I remember I was living in my parents at the time, home from school, living on my parents, and I was sitting on the red couch, and I call this my red couch moment. I've wrote about it in lots of emails. And I was reading a book by somebody named Robert G. Allen called Multiple Streams of Income. And this book, I still have it. It's like this tattered yellow book now. But this book had one chapter on a concept that he called infopreneuring, which just means selling information. At that point, revolutionary, right? 2009, infopreneuring, you can sell information. It existed, but nobody knew about it unless you were in very, very distinct. And this book, that was just one chapter. It was like, and also you can real estate invest, and also you can whatever. But I still remember in this book, there was this diagram in it, and in the diagram, there was this circle, and in all around the circle were all the income streams that you could build, and right in the middle of the circle was write a book. Write a book was in the middle of the circle. And the idea was all around it, the book is the center of the universe, and all around it are all of these other income streams that you can build off of that book. Now, this was just one thing that I was doing at the time. I also was studying ardently residential real estate investing in Canada, thinking, oh, maybe I can buy real estate. I also built 2 plans for remote smoothie operations. I was just searching, right? But again, I was pulling on these threads. I was seeing what felt good, but also what I stuck with. And so I started to write. But I wasn't writing a book at first. What I did is I had my clipboard with my client programs on it, and on the back I had a piece of paper, and every time that I did anything or responded to a client inquiry or felt like I had a crush on a secretary, every time that anything happened in the gym, which happened a little bit too often, but anytime that anything happened in the gym, I just write a bullet note on the back of that clipboard on that piece of paper. And then I went home at night and I thought about it. And I said, how could I have handled this situation better? How did I handle the situation? I had friends that I could call. And I said, how would you have handled this situation? And I created a document on my computer of all of these situations of how they were handled. That document is what turned into Ignite the Fire, my first book. And I'll get into that story in a second. But that was how it started. It was my way of cataloging my day's events in an attempt to improve, while at the same time documenting what I knew, because that's what the advice was in this book. Everybody knows something worth selling that somebody else wants to know, and the way to discover that is to first document what you do and try to improve upon it and build systems out of it. But at this point, I still thought I was going to go to medical school. I still thought I was going to do a PhD, not medical school at this point. And so I had another client who was the Associate Dean of Medicine at the University of Toronto. Again, if you can surround yourself with people when you're young like this, you can skip ahead a couple paths, right? And so he was the Associate Dean of Medicine at the University of Toronto, and I was researching programs for master's degrees in muscle phys, and the topic that I wanted to study. There was a program out in Saskatchewan that they were doing it, and then there were a few across the states, I think University of Colorado, 1 or 2 others. So I had read the research, and I had read everything that needed to be done in order to apply for master's programs. And I went to this client, and I said, hey, will you write me a letter of recommendation? You know, the Associate Dean of Medicine at U of T, that'd be a great letter of recommendation. His name was Rick. And he looked at me and he said, I 100% will write you a letter of recommendation. You know, I think you could do research. You're smart. But I'm only going to do it if you can tell me why you want to do a master's and PhD. I'm only going to write you a letter of recommendation if you can tell me why you want to do a master's and PhD. And I said to him, you know, because I think I want to write a book. And he took one look at me. He said, so write a fucking book. So write a fucking book. This dude is like 73.
It is the best when old people curse, and like the more The worse the word, the better it is. It's amazing.
Religious, salt of the earth, right? So write a
Love
fucking
it.
book. What he told me then, in not so many words, is don't wait for bullshit permission. If you want to do something, if you feel like you can do something, fucking do it. And what's crazy is that if I were to have gone down that path, if I were to go straight through and had finished my PhD, that year was the same year that my first book, Ignite the Fire, came out. Okay, so I have this document, right? At that point, I had been compiling this document for a long time, where I'd been cataloging everything. And it was about 100,000 words. This was a long document. It was a messy-ass document, but this was a long document. So I showed it to my mom, because the only person that I knew that had any experience in writing or publishing in any way was my mom. My mom worked on the side as an editor at one point in her life. Not for a very long time, but she did work as an editor. And she looked at it and she said, there's some really interesting things here, but you really need an editor. I'm a 23-year-old personal trainer at a small gym in Toronto. I don't know any authors. I don't know any editors. I know nothing about the process. This is 2009. I guess it was 24. This is 2009. I don't know anything about anything to do with writing a book. But I knew where books existed. So I went to the bookstore. And I found all of the best-selling fitness books. And in a notebook, I wrote down the names of the authors. And then I went home. And I sent a cold email to as many of them that I could find. And I asked them for the name of their editor and possibly an introduction. Almost every single one of them responded to me. Because keep in mind that in 2009, self-publishing existed, but it was very much behind the scenes. Upwork didn't really exist. CreateSpace was there. It's now Kindle KDP Direct for self-publishing, but CreateSpace existed. But it was kind of difficult to figure out how to self-publish a book. You had to really dig into the research. And to figure out, you had to kind of compile this smattering of contractors. And you didn't really know if they were good or not. You couldn't just call up some hybrid book in the box publishing company and be like, here's a bunch of money, give me all your people. So Brad Schoenfeld introduced me. He didn't know me, right? But he introduced me to his editor named Kelly James Enger. She was one of the people that I spoke to at the time. And what she said is, the material that you've got here is really interesting, but this is not a book yet. And it's going to be a lot of work to turn it into a book. And she was honest. Because some of the other people that I worked with were not honest, or that I spoke to were not honest. And I liked honesty. I liked people who were willing to turn away work while being honest about what the work entails. And my story of self-publishing, Ignite the Fire, is a story of optimistic ignorance. I didn't know what I didn't know. I had no idea what the process was like. But as I went on, I gained confidence in my ability to figure out the next step. It's like driving at night when it's pitch black along a winding road. And it's going to take you about an hour to get there. You know that there's a destination. You know that there's going to be twists and turns along the way. And you've got your high beams on. You can only see about 100 meters or so in front of you. But as you drive up 100 meters, the next 100 meters illuminates, and so on and so on and so on, until you get to your destination. That's optimistic ignorance. I think that is missing in our age of information overload, where so many of us are pessimistically over-informed. We know too much about things, and as a result, we question them too much. We doubt ourselves too much. We compare ourselves to other people too much. The reason why I think my 24-year-old self was able to write the book is because I knew so little about all of the reasons why I shouldn't have written the book. It never crossed my mind that other people out there were saying the exact same thing as me. It's not that they weren't. It's just that it wasn't thrust in front of my face. And so that gave me the energy to move forward. And so I do think that it is very important these days to maintain a certain level of what I call optimistic ignorance, right? You want to avoid catastrophic failure. You don't want to take risks that are going to take you out of the game. But I think it's actually okay to not think of things as goals, but instead use a systems mindset where you view your progress as a series of waypoints, as beacons pulling you in the right general direction forward, in the right general trajectory, knowing that you're going to shift back and forth. And over time, you're going to find your way. And the only way to do that is to say, all that I'm doing is opening myself up to the next step, to the next step, to the next step. I'm going to blind myself to everything else until then. So Kelly edited the book. She said, you need a copy editor. I didn't know what a copy editor is. I asked her. She says, oh, it's somebody that fixes the grammar and the formatting. I said, oh, you don't do that? She said, no, I'm an editor. Okay. She introduced me to a copy editor. How do you then find a designer for the cover of the book? How do you then get the book interior designed? How do you then market the book? And so on, and so on, and so on, and so on, right? Every single step was just another problem to figure out. But when the problems come at you one at a time, they're figure-outable. When you're overwhelmed because there's so much to know and so many other people out there that are telling you so many things, and you're so far down the rabbit hole of over-information, it becomes almost impossible to figure out that next step. And so you never get anywhere. So then, the book was about ready to come out. How do you market a book? Well, I started a website. Because I had the material from the book, right? I had all of these notes that I had been taking about what I was doing. I didn't know how to start a website. I didn't know anybody who had it. It's not true. I knew one person who had a website. I had a client at that time. Her name was Alexander Orlando. She was an Olympic gymnast.
She had to be.
What's up?
With a name like Alexander Orlando, she had to be an Olympic gymnast, John. They don't let you have that name at any other occupation.
She probably still does. She had the world record for most gold medals in the Commonwealth Games.
Of course.
And so Alex had a website. And so I asked her who made her website. And his name was Pat Benetti. Great. Pat, I need a website. I didn't interview website designers, right? Pat, I need a website. Pat says, sure, man. What are you doing? And so I told him, and he built me a blog. That was it. And then over time, the blog evolved, right, as I figured out more and more and more. But what I figured out very quickly is I had all of this information, but that's when I started to notice other people blogging. Our awareness seems to heighten when we start doing something to other people doing that thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't get heightened until we start. So I started noticing other bloggers. And I was like, well, I really want to make friends with these people and get them to support me. How do I do that? Well, actually, the best way to do that is to support them first. And sometimes to, you got to go out of your way to support other people. You don't ask them to be involved in your thing. You make a very compelling offer. So I started reaching out to these people and I said, hey, this article, hey, Nick Tumanello, right? This article you wrote on anti-rotation core training is really, really good. I'd love to pay you $50, syndicate that article on my website. I'm going to give it a new title. I'm going to format it, whatever, put pictures in it. You're going to get $50. You're going to be the author. And I'm going to publish it on my website. And I'll put a line on it at the top that basically tells Google, this is a syndicated version. The original article is over there. So Google knows how to scrape it properly. Well, that's a pretty easy yes, right? So I started to do this for more and more people, and I started to talent scout. And that's the lesson that I learned at this point is no matter who you are, the better you can recognize talent, particularly early on in other people's career and help them go up to the next level, the more successful you're going to be. You see what happens if you picture like a Kleenex and every corner of the Kleenex is a different person. If you pull up the center of the Kleenex, which is you, what happens is you lift up everybody else at the same time. A rising tide lifts all boats. This is the process of success. This is the process of success. Is you recognize other people that are doing great things and you help them become more great. And so what did I recognize at the time? There's a lot of people who have a lot of really, really good ideas who are writing for this audience for personal trainers, but they didn't seem to appreciate the nuances of writing on the internet enough, of having good subject lines, of copywriting, of formatting the articles well, of having good images, of doing some sort of SEO work on the articles themselves. They didn't seem to quite understand that very much. And so what I did at that time was I basically took their work and just made it fit for the internet better. And then they were, of course, proud. And they went and published it. Yes, of course, I'm getting road work done right outside my apartment, if you guys are wondering what that is. We're just going to roll with it.
I thought it was me.
No. Yeah. No, you didn't have well, it is Tuesday.
Usually me.
But usually you have chili at night on Tuesdays, right? Not during the day.
No daytime chili on Tuesdays. Not after 50, John.
No daytime chili on Tuesdays. He should be done pretty soon. He's tamping right now.
That would make for a great tweet.
What's that?
Daytime chili
Tuesday
after.
night chilies?
Well, after 50. That is
yeah.
Like relatable. That. Amber's mind is just constantly working on the obtruse in the background. Like, at any given point, there's just some weird shit happening that could be.
There's so many things I wanted to interject, and I just haven't because.
Right. It just needs one trigger word, and then it pours out. Like, weird shit incoming.
All right, let me keep going on this. I know there's an
keep going,
sound.
John.
I
Damn
apologize
it
for that, but I think it'll be fun.
It's all right.
So the PTDC really was about lifting others up and sharing good information in the industry. And over time, as I did more of that, right, I met more people. And then, of course, they started sharing that they're involved in this other website. Hey, my article got published on whatever. It's like, how do you build a website up from nothing? Is you start supporting other people and getting other people involved in the website. That's the way to do it. The first major, call it content upgrade, email list builder that we produced was called 101 Personal Trainer Mistakes. Amber's nodding because I guess you downloaded it way back when.
Yep, I remember.
I reached out to about 50 other colleagues in the industry. Not necessarily even internet colleagues, right? Just like people in the industry who I knew. And I said, hey, mind giving me, 2 or 3 mistakes that you made? And they did. And they sent, not all of them did, whatever, 30 or 40 of them sent back. And they sent back 2 or 3 mistakes. I kid you not. I copy and pasted that shit into a Word document. I didn't organize it. I didn't spell check it. There were duplicates of mistakes. All I did was I copy and pasted that shit into a Word document. I went on Fiverr.com. I had somebody make me a cover for $5. It sucked. But what I did do is on the cover, I said, here's the 30 people that contributed. Put all of their names on the cover. Put all of their names on the cover. Then I put up a squeeze page, a landing page, and said, if you want to download this guide, 101 Personal Trainer Mistakes, enter your email. And I sent a message to these 30 or so people who got back to me. And I said, hey, thanks so much. Put you as one of the authors to the book. Really appreciate you. Here's the page. That was how I got my first 300 emails, was that guide. It cost me $5. It was a Word document that was not edited in any way. And then it grows from there, right? Because once you start initial momentum, you can just keep doing the same thing, rinse and repeat over and over and over and over again. But I wanted to learn how to market. I wanted to learn basically like high-end internet marketing. Like at that point, this is probably now, Ignite the Fire came out in 2011. This is probably around 2012 or so. I was like, there are these kind of ebook guys that are selling these ebooks that seem to be making all this money. What are they doing? How are they building these landing pages? How are they doing everything? I was like, well, I could learn. there weren't really masterminds. I guess there were. I never joined them. There weren't really masterminds or programs that you could buy. But I was like, I could go out and try to learn and build my own product and do it, or I could just find somebody else with a product, say to them, I'm going to market your product for free. I'll do it for a commission, like a commission on sales, as a way for me to learn. Like so the lesson that I learned from there is, if you can learn on somebody else's dime, and if you don't have to do all of the parts, like if you understand what aspect of your development you're trying to work on, and you can eliminate everything else in order to focus on that aspect of the development. If I had to design a product at the same time as learning how to market a product, I don't think I would have been able to do it. And so I was put in touch with somebody, Kathleen Heffernan. She wrote something called the Bikini Model Cookbook. And I flew to Lethbridge, Alberta, and I sat with her for 3 days while we built the entire thing, start to finish. And I was learning. She had to buy me out 4 years later because she wanted to stop paying me, because that thing was making so much money. And I did that for a few people. I did that for Dan Trink as well. We built an arms-specific workout. Well, I basically said to Dan, I was like, I like you. I think you're smart. He was writing for T Nation at the time. He wrote an article on how to get bigger arms for T Nation. And I said, hey, Dan, can I take that article you wrote on T Nation, turn it into an internet product, and sell it for you? And I'll do it for 20% of the sales. It's pretty easy, yes? No shit. I took his article from T Nation. He was fully allowed to do this, right? I took his article from T Nation that he had all the rights to. I took the workout from it. I went to a graphic designer. I said, make me worksheets based off of this. Like, make me like workout templates based off of this. And then I had another designer, and we gave a name. We called it 2 Tickets to the Gun Show. I used Optimize. Oh, yeah, man, it was great. It was like, welcome to the Armageddon. It had all the puns. And then
It's beautiful.
And then I was the poster child for it. So I went through the whole workout myself. And on my Facebook, because that's what we were all using at the time, on my Facebook, I was sharing my progress. I was sharing my workouts as I was doing this program. And then we sold it. Made tens of thousands of dollars off of this thing. I mean, did pretty good. It was a T Nation article. What that taught me was 2 things. So I already talked to you about learning on somebody else's dime, focusing in on what you're doing. What that taught me was 2 things. The first is, you are your own best advertisement. Sharing your progress as you're building stuff is important. But the second is that the medium matters. Something that's not worth anything in one medium, changed slightly, can be worth a lot in another medium. And so look at what people are already buying. Pay attention to the medium through which they're buying it. And can you take something that already exists, either your own or somebody else's, convert the medium, and all of a sudden turn it into a really valuable product? Okay. But I still needed to figure out a way to monetize the PTDC. I'm still working full time, by the way. I'm training clients till about 9:30 at night. I'm getting home about 9:45 again, because I live close to the gym. I can do this. I'm getting home at 9:45 at night, and I am working on my website at night until about 2 a.m. from my 1-bedroom apartment. All right. Waking up at 6:37, doing it again. And I needed to figure out a way to fund the website a little bit. So I started doing affiliate sales. I started selling other people's information products and stuff, because I just didn't have the time and capacity. I was building up my own audience. I was building up my own platform. I didn't have the time and capacity to build my own thing yet. And I also didn't really know what my people wanted yet. I hadn't really spoken to them. So I didn't know what to build. So I was doing affiliate sales. And I remember I was in the gym. I had just finished training a client, and I was waiting for my next one. And I'll never forget this moment. I was in the gym. I was leaning on this little white railing, And I was waiting for my next client to come in, and I just popped on my phone to see if there was like a text message from him. Because sometimes he sent a text message if he was running late. And there wasn't one, so I opened up my email. And I see this notification that I'd never seen before. It's like, you've just made a new sale. How's this, right? So I pop it open. It's like, congratulations. You have made an affiliate sale of Joe Dowdell's Peak Performance Seminar. $240 US.
Nice.
And I'm thinking to myself, I just made more money from this one email from this website than I will make for the entire morning of these 6 clients that I'm training. Holy shit, this is possible. Holy shit, this is possible. That was the moment where I said, there's something here. I don't know what it is, but this hobby is now no longer a hobby. I'm a fucking turn pro with this shit. And I kind of looked around and I said, why aren't more people doing this? At that point, there were quite a few bloggers. Why aren't more people doing this? Why does it not see? What have I figured out that these people haven't? Or what am I missing? And what it seemed to me was that people were holding on, through now I could put language to it, fearfully to their old lives because they were unwilling to risk and commit and go all in. Many of them could. You know, these are people who didn't have families, who had good reputations. And so I spoke to the same client, Tom, who was super inspirational to me, and he passed along this thing, and he passed along what I now call the freedom number, and he's like, it's a simple equation, right? In order to put your fear mind at bay, you need to make sure that your core needs are taken care of. In order to do that, you have to define what your core needs are. Most people never do this, and so they fear. Fear is nothing but an irrational response to the unknown. If you make the unknown known, if you define what it is, you don't fear as much anymore. And so we said, here's the equation, right? This is called the freedom number. And it's very simply, what are your main expenses, right? Your rent, your food. If you have any dependents, what are their expenses? How much money are you making either passively or from work that you'll continue to do till the day you die? And then you need to account for taxes and stuff like that. What's that dollar amount, right? What's that dollar amount? And for me at the time, it was a low number. For me at the time, it was $2,600. Now it's way more than that now. I have a mortgage, I have kids, so whatever your number is. But at that point, it was $2,600. And so then I said, okay, well, I can then reasonably cut back my in-person training hours to the point where I'm going to make $2,600 a month in order to open up more time to focus on turning pro on this other thing, on writing on this website, right? And so I did. So I strategically worked backwards and I categorized my clients into, I called them gold, silver, bronze, but basically ABC level clients, right? A level clients are people who always showed up on time. When it was time for them to renew their sessions, they're like, yep, block of 20, yep, block of 50. You know, great people, love to work with, right? B were people who I love to work with, who I was pretty sure would renew and I just liked to join them. C were just, you know, everybody's got a 1 or 2 C clients. You just like, don't look forward to them. And so immediately I got rid of the C clients. I passed them on to another trainer. I built my schedule based off of when my A clients showed up. Any A clients that didn't fit into those windows, I gave them first option of the new windows. And then if there was any space left, I put the B clients in there. And then I gave away whatever was remaining. And so I went from about 40 hours of training to 25. Then I did that again as I started to make a bit more money with the website. I cut back my hours again to 15. And then I cut completely away from the gym to 0. Very few people are willing to commit to going all in on whatever the thing is that they want to do because they're scared, justifiably so. And I don't think that you should burn your boats. I don't think that that's good advice. I really don't. What I think you need to do is I think you need to put your fear at bay by defining what your situation is and what your problem is, and then strategically working backwards in order to open up that space for you. So once I started to commit more to the website, of course, it started to grow a little bit more. And we started to build more of a community. I was publishing a few times a week. I was more active on Facebook. I was working on the second version of Ignite the Fire, where I was including more people in the book. And I was just networking. I was attending tons of events. I'd go to New York 7 or 8 times in the summer. I'd take the overnight bus there, and I'd slept on a friend's floor. Like, I was not spending money, but I was going there and shaking hands. And I was like, okay, I think it's about time for me to create a product. I think it's about time for me to build something really to sell. At that point, I had hosted a few little seminars and stuff, but nothing really serious. You know, I'd hosted seminars and we filmed it and then I'd whatever. And so, but I don't really know what to sell, but I have a community. So I did 137 phone calls that were 13 minutes long over the course of about 2.5 months. And all I was doing there was I was asking people in our community. I sent out an email and I said, hey, I'd love to talk to you. Book in. Here's my link. Would love to know more about you. Right? On those phone calls, I asked people what their frustrations were in their industry, what their aspirations were in the industry. And I was trying to read between the lines. This lesson is actually talk to people. Talk to humans. They will tell you everything that you need to know. Avoiding humans, however, doesn't work. So I worked backwards. What did they want? Well, these people wanted to make a bit more in a bit less time with a bit better schedule. Most of them didn't want to step away from personal training full time, but they needed to make another $500 to $1,500 or so while they're not on their feet, and they wanted to be a bit more in control of their schedules. Online training seemed to be the answer to that problem, but not online training the way that people sell it now, where it's like you could become a 6-figure trainer. No. It's how you make a bit more in a bit less time with a bit better schedule. And so at that point, I created the first ever version of what I called 1K Extra, which was the first ever course for how to build an online training thing on the side, but I didn't market it as online training. Right? I marketed it as, here's a way to get a little bit more freedom back in your career, based off of what these people told me. And it was a minimum viable product. I built PowerPoint slides using clip art. I read it looking into my computer. I talked into my computer. I had no mic. I had no editing. I recorded my computer talking into it as I was literally clicking through PowerPoint slides with my finger on a mouse. And I put that out. And then I took in feedback and we iterated on it. And so the first launch did okay. Didn't blow the roofs off. Made a bit of money. And so I was like, okay, there's enough energy here to make sense for me to like do a bit more of it. And this is the story that I'm going to end my story with. So then, or at least this part of the origin story with. So then I took in the feedback and I redid a version 2.0, call it 1K Extra version 2.0. And I built this whole mug. I studied product launch formula. I did this whole big launch for this new thing. I built up a huge leads list for it, all this type of stuff. And, I launched it, and I launched it over the course of about 2 weeks. And the first day, there was a pretty good input, call it 50, maybe 100 people. I think I was selling this thing for $4.99 at the time. So that's like decent money, right? Like not bad. And then it kind of just like dropped off. Like no matter what I did, like nobody was buying. And I felt like a failure because I'd put my all into this. And at the same time, I was split from Allison. I was lonely. And there was a wedding in New York City. And this wedding that I was attending was 2 of the luminaries in the online fitness marketing world. Really like 2 of the biggest names were getting married to each other. And I knew at this wedding was going to be like all of the top online fitness marketers in the world. And I was attending this wedding and I was a nobody. And so I'm in New York City by myself. And I felt awful at this wedding. God, I was comparing myself to these people. You know that thing where you're like trying to puff up your chest, but you don't quite believe in what you're puffing up your chest about. And you're meeting these people and they're all millionaires or supposed millionaires. And you're just like, oh man, I'm not you, right? I don't belong. And so the day after the wedding, I had one more day in New York City and I was by myself. And I remember I was walking around New York, and this is how long ago this was. I was walking around New York and I had a phone, but my phone didn't have any data on it because I'm Canadian. So my phone didn't have any data on it. And so I'm walking around and I'm feeling like an utter failure. And all of my internal self-talk is this the end? Right? I always said I could go back to personal training. Maybe this doesn't work out. Like if I had just spent my last 6 months preparing for a launch that made me $20,000, $25,000, that's not going to work. Like I had invested probably 5,000-10,000 into this, so that's not going to work, right? Maybe I'm not good at this. Maybe I can't do this. I just met all these people. They're all great. They're all so successful, way more successful than me. And all of these things. And I'm walking around New York City, right, for hours. And this is the final day of the launch. So I had emails going out, right, this day. And finally at one point I was like, I'm just going to walk. I'm just going to check how it's going. So I walk into Starbucks. Starbucks is free Wi-Fi. And my phone connected to the Wi-Fi automatically when I walked in. And I knew that because I felt a buzz in my pocket. And then another buzz. And then another buzz. And another. And another. And I'm waiting in line to go and order. And my phone is just buzzing constantly. And I knew what those buzzes were. Those buzzes were sales notifications. And I get to the front of the line and I order a mint tea medium because I refuse to talk in Starbucks made up language. And I sit down with this mint tea and I pop open my phone and I start swiping through these emails. And I just see rows and rows and rows of sales notifications. And I didn't know the exact number at the time, but I figured it out later. At the exact moment that I was walking around New York City, questioning what I was doing, feeling like a failure, trying to decide whether I was going to hang it all up, I had just made $180,000. At that exact moment, as I was thinking those things, unbeknownst to me, this money was all coming into my accounts. Man, most people give up too soon. You never know what's bubbling underneath the surface. You never know how much of the good that you're doing that's out there is working for you in ways that you never know. Until it happens and you look back and you say, yeah, of course I made that happen. But if you give up too soon, it'll never happen. That's how it all started. And that was the moment where I said, in that Starbucks where I looked around, and I'm in Lower Manhattan because my friend was an investment banker and I was staying at his place. And I looked around and I was like, I probably just made more money in the last 3 hours than most of the people in this restaurant. And nobody knows. And I think I'm going to keep it that way. That was the start.
I have a question. The big moments with like your client at the gym who gave you the buck and other similar moments, did you ever go back and like tell them how significant those moments were to you?
Yeah. Yeah. Tom and I have kept in touch all these years. He's changed hospitals, but every so often we'll get together and go for a coffee or something. Rick and his wife, Kathy, we they're just like you might even see them. Like if you see somebody named Kathy, like comment on my Facebook or something, like that's who it is, right? Yeah. Yeah, not everybody. Not everybody. But definitely some. Probably not as much as I should, admittedly.
Yeah.
But all right. Well, I'm gonna go. Bye.